Louisiana zombie. 6 years ago, see an article in the newspaper about a friend getting arrested. Snap a pic to send to him and friends. Pic related. Tells creepypasta ass story on Facebook about a man driving a car that dies on the side of the road. Next day, find article about grave body snatcher. Implies man driving car was dead and buried. Years later, find old pictures of article and text convo. Remember story. Girlfriend thinks it's crap. I don't know what to believe. Skip long version if you want, and head to the post that starts with quotes for his copy-pasted Facebook journal from back then. I live in Winfield, Louisiana, a crappy little town in Wynn Parish. Your other states call them counties. You may have heard of the LA cities, Lake Charles, Natchitoches, or Shreveport. All those are more popular cities, between 1 hour and 2 hours from Winfield. Nothing special happens here, except every now and then, a racist preacher is caught smoking meth, or some crap like that, and people have some drama to feed off of for a while. Anyway, this happened about 6 years ago. I was looking through pictures on an old phone when I found a photo of this old newspaper article, and I remember just how weird that story that went along with it was. I read the newspaper pretty much every day. My favorite section is the police blotter, where they describe the events the local police were called out to during the previous day. Sometimes it's the only section I read, and I flipped to that page and started skimming through the articles to find it. A few of the events down, I see the name of someone I know. His name is Nate, which isn't surprising since the town and the towns around are so small that everyone knows everyone. We met in high school when I used to live in Jonesboro, like 30 minutes north of Winfield in Jackson Parish, and at the time of the article, we were in college and had some classes at the university in Natchitoches, but we weren't really close. I had my friends and he had his. He lived in the dorms at the university, but after high school, I found some cheap apartments in Winfield and just made the half-hour commute to the university. But one thing about him is he never did drugs. No alcohol, no cigarettes, no weed, not even a beer on the weekend. He didn't judge though, so after a while, he wasn't such a bummer to party with. He never got annoyed when we were drunk or high, just laughed and cut up with the rest of us. And that is like the most important detail here. He did not have any real strong opinions against stuffers using. He would even argue for legalizing weed sometimes. But if he got high, it was contact high from the chronic smoke in the room, and I'd never seen him act loopy, even when the room was like foggy thick, full of smoke. If he had any nicotine in his system, it was from secondhand smoke, and I'd never even seen him pretend to drink a drop of alcohol. He told us his parents were really bad users when he was a kid. They'd been to prison when he was young, and did NA and AA and got clean. But anytime he opened up, he'd say he never really forgave them and wanted to make sure that he didn't turn into them, since it is clearly in his genes. So, I snapped the picture of the article, posted here, with my cell phone, so I can send it to my girlfriend and a few others, including him, Nate. We all pretty much said the same thing. Read the article. It does not sound like him at all. Who would admit you're going to go by weed? Nate wasn't a super genius, but he wasn't a damn moron. So right at first, the article did not sit right with anyone that I sent it to. Some of us thought that maybe Nate was drinking and smoking alone, or sneaking some during our parties, and that's why he never judged and didn't mind hanging around us when we had some fun. And if you drink or smoke, you know it was hard to come by a sober friend who didn't judge you when you drank or smoked. I did not know what to believe, but I never saw a beer can around Nate unless I brought it. It never smelled weed or liquor on him. He never acted weird or like he was high or drunk. When I send Nate the picture of the article I snapped, we have the text conversation posted here. After sending a few friends the article I snapped, they all asked the same questions more or less, so I saved mine and Nate's conversation to send to them instead of typing stuff. And after mine and Nate's text convo, I was leaning heavily on Nate's side. The article did not sound like him to begin with, and for him to deny what was in it also did not sound like something he'd lie about. He would have no reason to deny it. All of his friends drank and smoked. He had nothing to lose. Nothing bad happened to him after his parents found a way to bail him out, and he served his mandated community service. Life for him went on as normal. Still to this day, he denies what was in the article, and there is no reason for him to deny it if it was true. If you can't read the image of our conversation, it says that the article is a load of crap, and it's not what actually happened, and that he posted his side of story on Facebook. He posted the story on his Facebook notes page, and I copied and pasted it from there. Back then you had a limited number of characters per status, and if you wanted to post a wall of text, you had to do it in a separate notes page. Note, I did not get to read the post immediately. At this time I was on Facebook, but did not log in very often. I woke up every morning, read the paper, and ate my breakfast, went to school, went to work, bathed, and did homework, and then went to bed. I did my clothes and partied on the weekends, and checked my Facebook whenever it crossed my mind. So by the time I read Nate's post, it was nearly a week later. Nate's post. I just got bailed out of jail for the stupidest crap I've ever seen. $5,000 bond that I don't have for a bunch of trumped up charges for no damn reason. I was charged for DUI, having an open container, intent to buy and intent to sell marijuana, possession of paraphernalia, and fine for a broken headlight. Does that make any damn sense to any of you? I don't even drink or toke when it's free, and I swear to God, these asshole pigs just wanted to fake a score, and who is going to question them? I am out in the middle of nowhere, scared out of my goddamn mind, and all they care about is stealing my goddamn money. Here is what actually happened to me. Weekend is over. It's like 4 in the goddamn morning, and I got class in 4 hours. Gonna take me about an hour or so to get back to the dorms. I'm gonna take a little nap and go to school just like normal. About 5 or so minutes out of Jonesboro, and the highway has been deserted since I left. But there is one car driving in the same direction, but on the wrong side of the road, and without his headlights on. I'm going about 50. This guy is going much slower, but he is weaving in his lane, like at any moment, he could leave his lane. I slow my ass down. His car keeps weaving. I honk my horn for really, really long, because I think this idiot is falling asleep and is gonna hit me at some point. But he keeps weaving down the goddamn road in the wrong goddamn lane, but I don't really care. This crappy, unknown part of a goddamn party state, and if this guy isn't falling asleep, then he is messed up on something, and I don't want any part of that. I start to just cruise down my lane, hoping to God this asshole doesn't decide to weave on over and slam into me, but that is what happens, god damn it. I'm just so mad thinking all about it. Just as the front of my truck clears his rear bumper, this idiot quickly swerves over into my lane and bashes his passenger rear door into my headlight. I am raging, but this asshole just gets back into his lane and weaves in it at like 25 miles an hour. I gotta see the face of this piece of crap, but that is when stuff starts to get weird. I kind of speed up so I can get a good look at him with my window down, because we are going slow enough for him to hear me yell at him. First thing I noticed was his dirty face, but he also looked strange in a way that wasn't very obvious. That's not the very first thing that I noticed or that worried me, so I'll get to that later, but I do remember noticing it when I looked over. Alright, so the guy behind the wheel was driving with his forehead resting on the steering wheel, but like his head was too heavy, or he was trying not to fall asleep, because as his head would start to drift to one side, so would the steering wheel and car. Then he would jerk his head back to the center, like he caught himself nodding off, all while his head stayed rested on the wheel, so the car would kind of straighten back up. I kind of swerved a little with the car, so he didn't goddamn hit me again. That's what kind of put me off, but frustrated me a lot more, cause if we had to get out and deal with this piece of crap, he probably wasn't going to have insurance or be able to talk coherently, and I didn't want to call the cops, cause I knew all that crap was gonna take forever. And it turns out that was smart, because of what happened later. Who knows whatever dumb charges I was gonna get stuck with. Anyway, the guy looked like he had arms, so I didn't know if the forehead swerving was part of a bad trip, and remember, I kind of thought he looked weird, like something was off, or like something was missing, so I tried my best to speed up to get past him. get in front of him on the opposite side of the goddamn road, hoping no one else is on the road tonight, and slow down to a stop so I can at least take some pictures of the damage. And if this guy was under the influence, I'll look in his wallet or raid his glove box and steal his insurance card. I don't really care, but I was not going to pay for this myself. Surprisingly, he doesn't slam into me this time and stops his car too. I don't immediately get out of the truck because we stopped before a sign and I read it, and it makes me reconsider everything. Jackson Correctional Facility. Beware of hitchhikers. So I stay in my truck and think about it for a second and watch the guy in his car behind me from my rearview mirror. I want to see if he gives me the "I just broke out of prison" vibe, and I still don't know what to think. The guy was acting sick or like wounded maybe. By the way, he was moving slowly and keeping his head down for most of the time. I put my truck in park, and eventually, the car behind me started to ease forward like he let his foot off the brake, and it idled into my rear bumper, which didn't even leave a scratch. But now I can see him just a little better. And the offness of his face I mentioned earlier is so apparent. But his headlights are off. It's 4 in the morning, and light from the moon is helping, but it's not really crystal clear, you know? There is definitely wet mud all over his hair and face, and where the mud isn't covering him, his skin is a creepy pale white, like the face of the goddamn moon. Like I said, the guy is acting wounded. He looks up at me, but I can't really see his eyes, so I don't know if he was just looking at what was in front of him, or at my reflection in my mirror, but his mouth is like disproportionate to the rest of his face. His whole bottom jaw has like no fat on it, while his nose and eyes kinda look normal, you know? But he was baring his teeth, the whole time like he was sneering at me. He eventually stops looking up and slumps his body over to the side, against the driver's side door, and stops moving. And that's when I get out of my truck. I figure he's either asleep or dead at worst, so I am less afraid now because he cannot hurt me. Don't get me wrong, I am still creeped out, and I was going to be careful. But the whole time, he looked like he was teetering on consciousness, and now he is out like a light. And sue me, but the first thing I did was walk around and take a picture of his license plate and the damage where he smashed into my headlight. I walk in front of the driver door, and the guy's head is against the window, leaving wet mud smeared against it, but it looks like the guy's hair has been ripped out in patches, exposing his chalk white creepy scalp. So the whole time I'm thinking, the mud on his face is definitely because he tried to flee prison, and maybe he was shot, or got hung up on some razor wire, or attacked by some police canines, cause something had to rip out his hair. But I have not seen a squad of police zipping by, like I figure they would be if someone escapes and they knew about it, so I still don't know what to think. Trying to take pictures, but it's way too dark, and my phone's camera does not have a flash on it, so I walk back over to my truck and pull the fluorescent standing mini floodlight that I always pull out when we go tailgating or having some fun outside at night, and quickly set it up next to my car. I take some pictures, and other than the guy not moving in the driver's seat, I see the car is empty, except for mud all over and around the driver's seat. I take a few pictures of the passenger rear door, where he hit my truck before. I check the passenger front door, and it is unlocked, so I'm going to quickly look in the glove box for this guy's insurance card, but when I open the door, I realize that the man is gone, and the driver door is open. The engine is still running, and I can hear the grass rustling as he tries to get away, but he is trudging so slowly, like his legs will not work properly, and kind of grunting, like he's struggling with everything he's got. He's kind of gasping too, like he's crying, but his arms are dangling by his side, like they don't work at all, and now I really think this guy is hurt, but again, it is the middle of the night. I can see better because of the floodlight, but he is fleeing from the driver's side, and the floodlight is on the passenger side. I don't want to follow this guy, and him end up hurting me. So I stand on the side of the road near his car, and I can hear him mumbling things like, "Not again," and "I don't want to go back," and "Just leave me alone," over and over, but it's really, really raspy and terrifying, like his throat was hoarse, like he'd been smoking all of his life. He walks through the thin veil of small trees, and I see him sit down, like he is exhausted, near the railroad tracks on the other side, and he just keeps mumbling some more of the same stuff, sputtering sometimes, because I guess some of the mud he was covered with got inside his mouth. But it was just constantly like, please don't bring me back, and I don't know what I'll do if I have to go back, and please go away. But it's a little louder now, because I guess he's sitting, and not trying to run and talk. I did not say anything, partially because I was too scared, and partially because I still thought he was maybe going to try and trick me into trusting him, and I did not want to give him the time of day. But that was probably the creepiest part of the whole night, because he was not articulating his words properly. Like, when I think about how he said it, and imitate it, he could make some hard letters that used the tongue, but just kind of moan for the sounds that needed his lips. I remember him baring his teeth at me earlier, like his lips were sneering away from each other. The whole escape from prison idea still sounded like the best story, considering the mud and the way this guy looked torn up. I did not see any blood, but it was dark, and I keep thinking maybe the wet mud was bloody dirt, and I just could not see the red color in the moonlight. He eventually shuts up, but then just stops moving altogether, and stops making noise, and just slumps over and lays there. I can't even hear him breathe, when a second ago, every breath was raspy, like he was being choked. He wasn't wearing an orange jumpsuit, but most of what he was wearing was covered in mud anyway. But I am pretty convinced this guy tried and failed to escape from prison, and now I'm shaken up. Before, when I thought he had died in his car, I had not heard him speak, or try to trudge away so desperately, and after that, it just left me sick to my stomach. I did not even remember to pick up my floodlight. I just got in my truck and dialed 911 on my cell phone with no luck. Barely 10 minutes out of town, and I could not get cell service. But whatever. I was pretty sure he was dead now, and I could not get a hold of the police. Dodson is less than a half hour away. Again, sue me, but I just left him there, and drove towards Dodson with the full intention of telling the police what happened and missing school that day. And that's when the morning got worse, because just before I get to Dodson, I get pulled over for going 20 miles over the speed limit. First of all, no. I was maybe going 10 miles over the goddamn limit. And secondly, yeah, I might have been speeding. I just watched a guy die on the side of the road. It's taken me everything I can not to cry my eyes out, just from the goddamn trauma. I tell the cop what happened, told him someone was dead on the side of the road. He asked me to step out of the car. He let me tell the whole story to him, and he wrote some on a little notepad. Put me in handcuffs without telling me why, and put me in his car and brought me to jail. For a while, I could not get anyone to tell me why I was being charged and what I was being charged with. But eventually, when the bail/bondsman came, they gave him a list of charges, and they were all a load of crap. And I don't know what I'm going to do, but I will do what I can to fight this as hard as I can. And sometime, they're going to find my goddamn floodlight next to that car, and that man's body, and I am just crossing my fingers they don't try me for murder. But given the made-up charges that I just racked up, who knows what is going to happen? That's everything on his Facebook journal. The next part of the story I regret telling, because I don't have the proof. Everything up to this point, I've tried to post the little bit of evidence I had saved because of the situation where I was sending the images to friends and the pictures that Nate took of the car. But the article and the next day's newspaper article I did not save because I did not find it relevant at the time, because I had not read Nate's Facebook post yet. And by the time I did read the post and realized the implication of the news article, it had already been over a week, and I could not find a physical copy of the paper. Flipping to the blotter of the newspaper and skimming through the articles to find it, like I usually do, the word cadaver caught my eye. And the sentence I read was, I'm paraphrasing, by the way, police found the decomposed cadaver missing from Gansville Cemetery, 6 miles away, just north of Dodson. Skim through some more. Stolen 2008 Nissan Altima was found, some number, a feet away against trees. Soil from the gravesite found inside. The car was apparently never put into park and just idled forward in a way when Nate pulled off. Then, no evidence left from the suspect that had been in the damaged and stolen Nissan. And stage light found at the scene, but police can only speculate. Like I said, me and Nate weren't personally very close, but to my knowledge, the cops never questioned him, even though his Facebook post both described that scene and that he told the cops what happened. I feel like he'd post about the cops accusing him or arresting him again if they did, and the newspaper article came out a day after Nate posted his journal. After this crap, some of my friends started to think Nate is just some weirdo with a creepy fetish and had help that night, since there were 2 cars. But Nate was never weird. He never said strange stuff, never acted more than just a laid-back kid, never had out-of-place hobbies. Sometimes we'd show up unannounced to his dorm. It happens all the time in small towns when you know everyone, and he never looked dirty, like he'd been digging graves or anything weird or out of the ordinary. He was at school all week long, and we all ever stayed in Natchitoches or all drove up to Jonesboro to party, so it was like he was never out of our sight. But who knows? Maybe Nate is a freak. Maybe he's crazy and does stuff that he doesn't even know he's doing, but the whole thing sounds really fishy from both sides. I don't have a single reason not to believe Nate's story. Hell, if I'd have ever seen him just next to a shovel in a hardware store, I might think otherwise, but nothing. I trust Nate, I mean, wouldn't you? Morag, Nessie's lesser-known cousin. Make mention of Scottish lake monsters to most people, and doing so will inevitably conjure up imagery of the world's most famous, unknown water beast, the Loch Ness Monster. It's a little-known fact, however, that there are more than a few Scottish lakes with legends of diabolical creatures attached to them. While many of those stories are decidedly fragmentary in nature, one of them is not. Welcome to the world of Morag, the resident beastie, or far more likely, beasties of Loch Morar. At just over 11.5 miles in length, the loch has the distinction of being the deepest body of fresh water in the British Isles, with a depth of just over 1,000 feet. Unlike Loch Ness, Loch Morar can boast of having practically clear water. It takes its name from the village of Morar, which is situated close by, and specifically at the western side of the loch. It was the site of the Battle of Morar, a violent, death-filled confrontation between the Mackenzie and MacDonald clans, which occurred in 1602. As for the monster, Morag, the tales are many. What makes the Morag cases so different to the ones coming out of Loch Ness, however, is not so much the descriptions of the creatures, but that such reports are often hard to uncover. Unlike Loch Ness, Loch Morar is an isolated, seldom visited loch. It is bereft of much in the way of a large population. The result, tourists to Scotland very rarely visit it. For that reason, just like Las Vegas, what happens at Loch Morar very often stays there. Nevertheless, there are enough classic cases on record to strongly suggest strange things lurk in Loch Morar. One of the earliest reports came from a man named James MacDonald, who claimed a sighting of a humped creature snaking through the waters late one cold, dark night in January 1887. An astonishing sighting occurred in 1948 when a man named Alexander MacDonald sighted a huge animal on the bank of one particular stretch of shore. In a few moments, it headed into the water and vanished. Without doubt, the most amazing and, for the witnesses, nerve-wracking encounters occurred on the night of August 16th, 1969. That was when William Simpson and Duncan MacDonald were traveling on the waters near the west end of the loch. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, a large animal, possibly 30 feet in length, loomed into view and actually slammed into their boat. When Simpson tried to blast the creature with a shotgun, it sank beneath the waves. As a result of the ear-splitting sound of the gun, both men concluded, rather than as a result of Simpson actually having shot the monster. As for what the Morags might really be, Richard Freeman, zoological director of the Center for Fortean Zoology, says, "As with the Nessie, I think the best bet are giant, sterile eels. The common eels swim out to the Sargasso Sea to breed and then die. The baby eels follow scent trails back to their ancestral freshwater homes, and the cycle begins again. Sometimes, however, a mutation occurs, and the eel is sterile. These stay in fresh water and keep on growing. Known as eunuch eels, no one knows how old they are or how big they get. One theory suggests that these rare, naturally occurring mutations may now be on the increase due to pollution. PCBs and beta blocker chemicals have long been implicated in causing sterility in fish. Could they be causing more eunuch eels in the deep lakes of Scotland? For now, we just don't know. But, just perhaps, one day we will know. I'm in South Florida now, but I spent most of my life in Pennsylvania. We were at an out-of-the-way area along Racetown Lake in Huntingdon County, and we will be camping out, and we weren't looking for Bigfoot. It was spring 2022. I didn't even know there was a Bigfoot. We were looking for firewood. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and, long story short, we saw this creature in the water, and it looked like it was... Actually, it looked like it was fishing. You know, like feeling around with your hand. Like people who could catch catfish with their hands. It's called noodling. It looked like he was doing that, and it was just doing things that were not normal. At first, we thought it was a person, but it was a real mucky bottom. It's a backwater in early morning. It's like 3 or 4 feet deep, and it will go all the way down. So just like, only his nostrils would be out. He'd stay there for 2 to 3 minutes, then stand up and move around. We soon realized it was not a person. I went down to get a closer look, and when I got down to the water's edge, and it stood up, it was so huge and massive, and I couldn't tell, you know, it was a creature. I could not see distinct details, but it was a really large creature, and it was like a man. I strained to get a better look, because I could not believe what I was looking at, and I was probably like 40 feet away from it. I was kind of hiding behind some brush and stuff. I stepped on a twig, and in an instant, it headed out of the water. Probably 30 feet from shore, and in a mucky mud environment. In 3 to 4 feet of water, you would usually strain and struggle to get out of that water. It just moved out like it was a bird skimming the water. Just instantly, it was out of the water and on the bank. When it reached the shore, it quickly walked into the forest. It had 2 large fish, looked like catfish, by the mouth in each hand. So X, I am here to tell you a story that is sort of a local legend among my town. I lived in a small township in northern Michigan called Fife Lake, which is about an hour or so from Traverse City. It's a sleep little place, no more than 500 people in the whole town, and we essentially all knew of all the people who came to the lakefront. We had lots of tourists during the 4th of July season, but after that, the whole place died down to a quiet, barely alive little hamlet. The people of Fife Lake are lovely, friendly, personable, very welcoming, except during the autumn. There is a sort of legend that says during the autumn, any outsider who decides to stay will bring a disaster with them. So we try to keep anyone from agreeing to move there during the September to November months. This legend stems from an old Native American legend of the Mbez-Sukseh, which means lake deer. The early white settlers misunderstood the natives' attempts at English and translated it as lank deer, and so it is known today. They say that the first white man to see the lank deer was a foreigner, even to his own people. He showed up at the settlement alone and asked for food. It was harvest season, and the settlers welcomed the new guest. He ate heartily and slept outside by the fire. Come nightfall, he awoke suddenly and shook awake some other settlers. He stared into the darkness at the edge of the firelight, and they say that after a few moments, he began to convulse, making a horrible noise akin to a wounded deer crying out in agony. He threw himself into the fire, ignited, and died. As his cries subsided, a single deer emerged from the shadows by the lake, thin and ill. It stepped up to the fire and looked at the settlers. In Potawatomi, It said, "You are not welcome here, and like this man, you too will burn in the fires of your unmaking." The settlers, not knowing the local language, took their muskets and attempted to shoot the lank deer. However, they failed to land even a single bullet. No one ever heard from the settlers there again. But it's said, if you look in the woods of northern Michigan, you can find a patch of land where no life will grow, and this patch always looks burnt and desiccated. Throughout the years, as more white settlers took up residence in the area, they passed down the story of the lank deer, a harbinger of destruction who curses those who give the bounty of the earth to outsiders who did not work for it. At different times, people would report seeing a ghoulishly thin deer wandering in the woods, sometimes paralleling them, sometimes staring into the windows, always with an intelligent gleam in its eye. They say its eyes are those of a man and not a deer. In modern times, you will find no mention or written record of this legend. The locals keep it to themselves, and won't even talk about it with people who aren't at least second-generation members of the community. But if you're out alone in the woods at night, you can still see this lank deer. If you are a visitor during the autumn, don't eat berries from the bushes. Don't eat fish you catch. Don't take food from the farmers' markets. Make sure everything you consume is made elsewhere, because if you don't, you may find the lank deer staring in your window while you sleep, the hungry look of vengeance in its eyes. The lank deer protects the land, and you are not of the land.